So let's have a look at this. So someone was asking on Reddit, I believe. They had a puppet with the normal camera at some distance, and they had a window that they didn't want the player to walk through because it's just a window. But the thing is, the camera. So they let's have a look. If I just remove the logic. So this would be like invisible but collidable like that. So then the player can't walk through it. That's reasonable. But they wanted to be able to see through it, which is fine. But then when they would turn the camera, it would kind of sink through to the outside of the wall, and you could like see stuff they didn't want you to see on the outside because it wasn't all prettied up or whatever. So they tried yeah, so it works fine when it's visible because the camera knows that it probably shouldn't be inside visible things, so it tries to kind of stay within the visible boundaries. But the thing is, then you can't see outside. So I think I'll just do it in here. Rebuild the thing I made. Okay, so first we make a sculpt. The general idea is we will hide this, or make it we'll make it invisible when there you go. Make it invisible when the camera can see it, but when the camera's like round like that, then we'll make it visible again, so that it won't try and back through it again. But to do that, we need to do some shenanigans. So we've got a cube. We'll put a chip on it. And first we want to make it follow the camera's position. So for that we go into gameplay gear, global settings. In here it has a load of settings, but it also has some outputs, such as the camera transform. This is it doesn't matter what camera gadget it's using, or if it's using the default camera or the puppet camera or anything. This is the current view the player has that's being rendered. So we want to follow that position. The thing is, you can set the target position manually, like using this thing, but this is a transform as opposed to a position. So let's have a look at what that means. So if we go into splitter and wire that in, this is a scene transform fat wire type, which means it has a translation, which is a fancy word for position, and rotation and scale. So we want the position. We plug that into the follower. So let's just up that a bunch like that. And if you just play time, it'll zoom in into the camera. And if you pause time and pull back, we can see it's at the camera position. And then if we go over here, play time, it's gone to the camera position again. So that part's working. We're going to use that to, let's set up the trigger zone. So the way we're going to figure out what is in the general view of the camera is using a trigger zone, and this is a bit of an approximation, but it should work, and it has worked in the test I did anyway. So I'll put that in the center. Oh, it's rotated around for some reason. So it's pointing over there. we'll also make sure the follower position is in the center as well. So if you weren't aware, the grid is very useful for this. So let's just put these at random positions like that. So they're currently not in the same position. We want those to be exactly the same position, because the follower dot will be the point in relative to the cube and everything that will be at the camera position, and we want this to be in the same spot. So for that, I turn the grid on, and I use L1 and triangle to align it to the cube to make sure we've got a good working spot to use. Then if we select one of these or we tweak one, it will show the little white gizmo, which is the location that it uses. So we'll put that there. Oh, and another thing is, as you're dragging this around, you notice it isn't actually on one of these dots, so then it can be really hard to line up two things if they're both slightly off. So if you hold it and press triangle, it will snap to the nearest dot of the grid. So then we'll put that in the center there, and we'll grab the cone and do the same thing. Press triangle, and for some reason it's rotated again. Let's rotate it around. Okay, so we got a cube which follows the camera. So say we're looking over here, and we pause, and the zone. See, the camera, it doesn't know what direction the camera is facing. So if we go over here, it's still looking over there. It's only using the position of the camera, and at the moment there's no way of using the position of the camera, the rotation even, as far as I know. So what I did was use just 1 second. Cool. Yes, a follower. So not a follower, a look at rotator. So with that, we can tell it we can do it the same way with a target position point to make this look at. So but we just want to use a tag, which is, you just type in a tag name there. So if you weren't aware, whoa, we've got to do something. We need to, because this cube thing isn't meant to be seen or collidable or interact with the imp, we can turn all those off, and it's not meant to cast shadows either. So if you got like an invisible sculpt to get these functionality, these physical moving around stuff, then make sure you've got all those turned off. Right. What was I saying? Oh yeah, if you just play the game, so it's kind of rotating around the puppet because it's possessible, and when you go into it, then it will follow the puppet like that. So we know that the camera will be looking at the puppet, so we need this cube to look at the puppet as well. So let's make a tag to use for the look at puppet. Oh, I already added one. Let's delete one. Right, to make a tag, go to gadgets, sensors and input, and then tag, and then we'll give it a name. Player center. Then we'll click on it, and how best to demonstrate that? I'll just show you something. So we've made the distance from the puppet really small, then right here, but you notice we're not looking at its feet, we're kind of looking at its neck kind of area. So we want the cube to be looking at its neck area as well. So if we click on the tag, just like the trigger zone and everything, we can see the white gizmo and drag it around. So let's move it up to around the neck and then move it across, and it's wonky for some reason. Okay, that should do. So that's called player center. So in here we want to look for player center, and we can type it in here, or we can hover over this name field and press up and down, and it goes through all the applicable things like tags. So now we've got player center, and we want that to be super fast as well. I'll use L1 and square to type in here. That's really useful for getting the maximum value, because you can just hold down X on the 9 and press R2, and it will go use the highest value possible. So now if we play time, it's kind of, yeah, if you actually, yeah. So as we move around, you can't really, let me pause time. Yeah, so the back of it is looking at the thing. If you click on the look at rotator, it actually has an arrow, and that is where the quote-unquote front of it is, and it will try to make the front look at whatever position it's trying to look at. So you can adjust that if you want. Oftentimes use a grid for that. Say if you wanted that to look be the front, then you can do that, but I think this will do fine. Cool, but the crucial thing is the trigger zone. So if we just play, I'll make that more distant again. Oh, that's probably too far. Right, so if we look down from the top and then edit, then the trigger zone is looking down from the top, and that whole cube is pointing downwards as well. And if we look from the front, kind of up like that, and we go into here, trigger zone is looking in the right direction again. So that part is working. Close those. Now the tricky part is we want that trigger zone to capture, to kind of engulf anything that the camera sees, or within reason, within like the this kind of area that the camera could be in. Hey Seth, how's it going? So for that we will adjust these values to make it like camera size, and then we will make it really deep like that. So but what dimensions do we want for that? Well, I think it depends on the camera settings themselves, but I think the kind of I am up to so you know how the camera, let's make that, so say you got a window, so you don't want to, you want it to be collidable, so you can't walk through it, but you don't want it to be visible because you want to see through the window. Oh, we have a, there we go. That works fine, but then if, oh, that was weird. But then if you're like this, the camera starts floating through it, which you might not want if you don't want to see the weird outside of the building that you haven't done up all nicely. So we're making a way of fixing that. The general idea is to get a trigger zone to tell certain parts that they can be seen or not seen by the camera. And if they can't be seen by the camera, we'll make them visible, which is counterintuitive, but if it's visible then the camera won't try and float through it. That's the basic idea. Cool. So yeah, as I was saying, we need to get a kind of zone the normal camera will see, and in my testing anyway, it's been roughly the same as this, the default settings for just a regular camera. The useful thing is, if you actually stamp a camera down, you can see the box that it sees. So if we pull that out to here, and actually it will be like way over here. I think maybe this method isn't actually worth doing, because we probably just want the trigger zone to be as big as possible. But anyway, so it goes out like that. Cool. So now we make the zone size the same hugeness, like that. So it's a bit wider than it is tall. Yeah, I think that should be okay for now anyway. Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of huge for sure. I think in my actual example I made it smaller, but just to be safe. So yeah, so now if we play time, and oh, we need to delete that camera again. Okay, so if we look from this direction, then open the trigger zone, it's looking at this whole thing, and the important thing is it's engulfing anything we could be seeing from like within this area. So okay, so the next part is I think to demonstrate, I'll do a little demonstration. Hence the word demonstrate. So in here there is a detected thing. This is the tweak menu of a sculpt, and in the labels tab you can set different labels. You can also set detected, or there's a detected output. This is when a trigger zone detects it, then the sculpt knows it's been detected. So we can take that, and for the demonstration I'll put it into glow and make it modulate so that it just glows a little bit. So now when we're looking at it, it should glow. Is it glowing? Nope, because we haven't set it up yet. Okay, so ignore that. So this has got a name, and in here if you select label, this actually, so it uses the labels, but it also, and we want it to detect anything. If it's on there and it's invisible, then it will never actually detect it. So we want it to be both visible and invisible, and it will just do that for safety. Yeah, so the other thing you can do though is give it a name to detect, and it will look at the sculpture name, and if it's the right name then it will detect it. If it's the wrong name it won't detect it. So as you saw before, we had a name called camera blocker, and in here we can use that same technique up and down to go through. Now we're going through the label, the sculpt names, because that's what can go in here. So now when we go through time, it's currently visible, so it's glowing. And if we look away and then edit again so we can see what's going on, it's not glowing anymore. So if I just do a better test so you can see it better, let's just make that way smaller. Oh, it's just really thin. There you go. So now if we play, the kind of middle of where I'm looking at is the zone, right? So then when we're looking with the middle towards the thing, it glows. Does that make sense? And then as we look away, the trigger zone isn't hitting it, so it doesn't glow. Yeah, that's effectively what we're going to do. I'm not sure. I mean, things that are behind the camera won't be rendered by the engine anyway. So I think Dreams optimizes that away for you anyway, without you having to worry about it. But good idea. It's good to think about optimizing and different ways of doing stuff. Yeah, so we'll put it back to the original, turn the original one on. Okay, so now what do we want to do? So go back to the original problem. So it doesn't go through it because it's currently visible all the time. So if it's behind us, we want to set it to visible, but if it's in front of us, we want to be able to see through it. So we'll use this detected thing to know if it's in front of us or not. But we'll need a tiny little smidge of logic like that, and all we need is a not gate. So if it's not detected, if it's detected, this says if it's not detected. If it's not detected, then we want it to be visible, and if it is detected, we want it to be invisible. So as we turn the camera, we can go towards the thing, but now it's visible behind us. So if you pause, have a look, it's completely visible. But then, oh, now we can, yeah, there you go. But so you could just about see it kind of flash there. That's because we need to make our trigger zone wider, maybe. It's probably the frame rate actually, because this runs at 30 frames a second, whereas the graphics runs faster. So if we just make the trigger zone bigger, then maybe that'll help. Yay! And oh, just about saw it. So you'd probably want to not make it bright red and glowing, but some like neutral color or something. Oh, that's interesting. So if we're facing away and we try and get nearer, because it's visible, the camera won't go through it. It's so that the camera won't float outside of your float through your windows. Yeah, effectively. So I think I just found a bug with this idea of going right up to it, and it's still in front of the thing, so it stays invisible. So then the camera can pass through it because it's still being seen, So I think probably maybe if we just oh do that. Just move the wall forwards. Will that help? No. I think maybe you just want the blocker to be further back and have a like thinner one for the character to collide with, maybe. You can like fiddle with this and get it to work just right, and maybe it just won't work properly in some situations for you, but yeah, I think that fixed it. So you make sure the surface of the camera blocker over here is further back than the actual collision surface you want the puppet to hit, and then that should fix it. Yeah, cool. Does that make sense for everyone? Any questions about that? How that's working? Just make it. If we use the Q tool, can't grab the sky color. So, okay. Oh. And make it waxy, so that if we're turning really fast, you can get it to look less. I mean, most of the time people aren't going to be spinning round and round, so that's probably fine, but in case they do happen to see it for a frame, should probably cheat your way through it. Oh, you probably want stay upright on as well, so it doesn't kind of twist. Cool.